Russia may be backing India 100% on Kashmir, but several other countries say that while Kashmir may be an internal issue, human rights and the clampdown in Jammu and Kashmir is an international issue. The big question is international opinion on the Kashmir situation now changing. That's our second debate tonight, and it comes at a time when just about 45 minutes back, there is news coming out of Jammu and Kashmir that phone lines will finally be restored across all the remaining exchanges. I believe there are about 9 or 10 additional exchanges where phone lines services did not operate. But if this happens, and it's supposed to happen overnight, then that's certainly a very welcome sign towards a resumption of normalcy. But it does come certainly at a time when, and it's important to mention this, on the one hand, we have got a great deal of support from all countries around the world on how Kashmir is an internal issue of India, how India and Pakistan, if they have to sort this out, need to work it out bilaterally. But at the same time, a great deal of criticism in terms of the human rights situation on the ground. So let's just bring up some details and a graphic on where India stands with the world community. Again, wanting to repeat that as far as the world community is concerned, just about everybody says that Kashmir is India's internal issue, but people say, many countries and leaders say, that human rights is a global issue. Firstly, Russia today unanimously supported India. The Prime Minister is in Russia at the moment. The Foreign Secretary said, our understanding is that Russia firmly stands with India on Kashmir. That's what the Foreign Secretary said today, shortly after Vladimir Putin, the Russian President, and Prime Minister Modi met. Now, the US State Department, and that's what Prime Minister Modi also said, both are against outside influence in the internal matters of any nation. That's what's been reported, attributed to the Prime Minister in Russia. The US State Department has said, remember what I mentioned, it's an internal issue of India, but we continue to be very concerned by reports of detentions and the continued restrictions on the residents of the region. We urge respect for human rights, compliance with legal procedures, and inclusive dialogue with those affected. Now, the European Union, their High Representative has said, and he has a quote, reiterated the call to avoid an escalation of tensions and stressed the importance of steps to restore the rights and freedoms of the population in Jammu and Kashmir. Canada, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, has said, in recent days, I have spoken to many Canadians, including Canadians of Kashmiri descent who have family in Jammu and Kashmir, about this important case. Like them, Canada is concerned about the risk of escalation, infringements on civil rights, and reports of detentions. The UK Foreign Secretary, of course, they've had turmoil in Parliament after that, said just recently, the issue of human rights is not just a bilateral issue for India or Pakistan or a domestic issue, it's an international issue. We expect internationally recognized human rights to be complied with and respected. And finally, the French President, one of our strongest strategic partners with whom we have all sorts of defense deals, said just after meeting Prime Minister Modi that France remains attentive to ensure the interests and rights of civilian populations are properly taken into account in the territories on both sides of the Kashmir ceasefire line. So the question is this, while it may be an internal issue, the decision that India has taken as far as 370 is concerned, the concern over human rights and the clampdown on the state which continues is no longer just something which India says or can argue that we have international endorsement. Joining us now, Seema Sirohi, the columnist for Gateway House and the Economic Times, joining us from the United States. Michael Kugelman, the Deputy Director and Senior Associate for South Asia, the South Asia program, also joins us from Washington. Ajay Shukla, my former colleague, with us in the studio. Anuradha Bhasin Jamwal, the Executive Editor of Kashmir Times. Former Ambassador and the former Consul General to Karachi, Ambassador Rajiv Dogra, and Dr. Geeta Bhatt with us once again. Thanks so very much for being with us. Seema, to you first. In the United States, we've had this very strong statement from the United States on the human rights situation on the ground. How do you see this being played out in Washington in the days and weeks ahead?
Hi, I'm not able to hear you very clearly, but I think I got the gist of the question. The situation is as such. The Congress, when it reconvenes next week, there's a lot of criticism among the Democrats about the continued detentions of political leaders, especially, and the blackout, the clampdown on the internet. Basically, people in the West see the internet as kind of a basic right. It's like having electricity or water. So they're very exercised about it. And people are talking amongst each other, the congressmen and women, about holding a hearing. So if there's a public hearing, you can expect a lot of criticism, a lot of questioning, and it would give kind of an open forum to anti-India forces as well as human rights activists to come out and criticize the situation.
Ambassador Dogra, the sense that we were actually achieving a lot, is that changing as a result of these concerns?
Well, I think I'll only add to what you had outlined and what Seema had further added on. That from 5th August, when it was first announced, for the next few days, the entire world was with India. That is an internal issue, it's a domestic issue. But then Pakistan, somewhere along the way, seems to have hijacked the agenda, concentrating on human rights. Our messaging somehow stalled after that first spurt. And in today's age, it is a message which is important, not the substance at times, unfortunately. If you read any of the Western press, any of the Western media's articles or opinion pieces, the chances are that 9 out of 10 are going to be critical of India. What human rights abuses have taken place, no one has a fix on that, and no one has solid evidence on that. There are in fact various interpretations that some of them may also be interpretive reports by some of the people who are filing those pieces. So our messaging has to be important, it has to change, it has to be fast. And second, what about the human rights of people living in Kashmir who are affected by terror? After all, the first death that took place was because of a terrorist bullet. So we have to highlight those things, and we have to acknowledge the fact that time is slipping out.
Ajay, we've been looking at this obviously from a human rights standpoint in terms of international reactions. There's also that very important security standpoint. We're going to just play out this story where security agencies today presented to terrorists from the Lashkar-e-Toiba, mentioning the point or making the point that we have this huge security presence on the ground. It may have caused inconvenience, but two things have taken place. Number one, security forces claim that nobody has died as a result of them firing, but there have been the loss of about 5 people as a result of the actions either of terrorists or stone pelters or both. Let's just listen in to them and these Lashkar-e-Toiba terrorists that they have caught. These Pakistani men, security agencies say, are a part of the Lashkar-e-Toiba and were caught when they were on a recce mission ahead of an effort by a larger group to try and enter Kashmir to carry out terror attacks.
की है और मेरे साथ मजीद उसने भी एक ही दिन काम शुरू किया हमने ट्रेनर का 3-4-5 साल हो गए हमें दोनों और उसके बाद हमने उधर प्लानिंग बनाई है कि हम बॉर्डर क्रॉस करके जाएंगे.
There's been at least one effort at infiltrating into the valley every single day since Article 370, which gives Kashmir its unique status, was made ineffective on the 5th of August.
Pakistan is desperate to infiltrate maximum terrorists into Kashmir Valley to disrupt peace. On 21st of August, we have apprehended 2 Pakistani nationals belong to proscribed terrorist outfit Lashkar-e-Toiba.
Terrorist launch pads right along the line of control remain very active, says the Army's top commander in the Kashmir Valley, though he points out that in the heartland, not a single civilian has been killed in firing by security forces.
Fifth civilian death in last 30 days. This is the fifth death which has happened because of the terrorists, the stone pelters or the puppets of Pakistan.
At the moment, there are two distinct security threats in the state. Boots on the ground in the heartland to deal with protesters and potential terrorist encounters, and soldiers deployed near the fence along the line of control. For now, security in both areas has meant an unprecedented clampdown. What happens when force levels come down to normal levels? Vishnu Shom for NDTV. So Ajay, that's the security standpoint. It's a valid argument that, look, we need to be prepared for what's coming our way. But how does this, in a sense, interfere with the human rights situation on the ground where we have an entire state in clampdown?
Yeah, I'm sure it's nobody's case that one can place the whole of Kashmir under curfew for months on end because the security sort of dimension needs to be catered for. You know, the government has got this coming to it. For the last year, it has not allowed foreign correspondents to go up to Kashmir. It has said you will apply to us for permission before going. There's a long-winded procedure. Many of them have not got permissions to go and report from Kashmir, and they have effectively alienated the international reporting community. Now it's payback time for the international community. Every foreign journalist based in India who's reporting this story, by the simple virtue of how he has been treated or she has been treated over the last 1 year, not allowed to go to Kashmir, not allowed to report, says, now here's my chance to report a good negative story on India. And the negative story is sitting over there. It was at one stage justifiable to have a curfew. 1 month down the line, it becomes far less justifiable. 2 months down the line, I dread to think of what the reportage and the international sort of reactions are going to be. So I'm not sure that the government has thought this through at all. How is it going to restore normalcy? Is it going to keep curfew indefinitely? I don't know where the answers are.
Geeta, something that's happened right now, because this is the DC of Srinagar who's tweeted at 9:36, so just a few minutes back, most telephone exchanges to be functional tonight across the valley, mobiles being restored gradually, already buzzing in Kupwara. Thanks for your patience and regrets for your inconvenience. This is happening right now. Do you believe that this is a first step towards that normalcy that everybody wants?
Well, Vishnuji, slow and steady, Kashmir is coming back to normalcy. And, you know, as we saw that, you know, that even earlier first the schools were opened and the offices, government offices were open. Now they are trying to, you know, restore back the telephone lines. However, the point, you know, which is being talked about here, that how the foreign media is reporting what is happening in J&K and how the concern that has been shown by international media. You know, it is very important to notice that there are certain very select you know, international news reports and newspapers which always have shown India in a poor light. And while we are talking about countries who are, you know, who are talking about their concern of human rights in India, for example, in France, you know, they have, for example, banned covering faces in public places. So if that kind of a thing is going to happen in India,
but a scenario
you know,
in one country doesn't compare with a scenario in our country.
This is also
and I'm sure there's been a great deal, and there has been a great deal of criticism of that as well.
That is exactly what I'm trying to see. Each country has, you know, they have
journalism. Journalism doesn't mean that you reflect the standpoint of the government.
Certain issues which they
right?
Need
so
to be,
they would have they wouldn't necessarily
no,
write.
I'm not saying that. They can international community, international newspapers can report what they want to report. But did anyone talk about human rights when, you know, the indigenous people of Kashmir, the Kashmiri Pandits, the kind of genocide that had taken place? No, where were all these? Where were these international newspapers? Did anyone bother to report by any one of them?
Michael Kogelman, would you like to come in over here? Because this is what Geeta is actually mentioning is a very popular narrative. And that popular narrative is that, look, broadly speaking, look, here's the foreign media. They have come to our country. They have come to our Kashmir. They are criticizing us and slamming us. But what have they done in the past? Or what have they done in their own countries? This is the popular narrative which seems to have had resounding success. In India, this criticism doesn't really have an impact. Is this what the story is all about in terms of how it's being looked at, between what people over here see, the large number, and how people in the media abroad see?
Well, look, I mean, there's so many stories to be reported on in Kashmir. And so naturally, the international press would focus on the stories that would attract the most attention and be of most interest to readers, which would be the troubling stories focused on the problem areas, particularly in the Kashmir Valley. I know there's been a lot of debate about whether this international media coverage is distorted or fake. My view is that that is not the case at all. And certainly, I would agree with what one of the other panelists said, that we should not forget about what's happened in previous years and the plight of the Kashmiri Pandits in previous years. But, I think that the international media is focusing on the present. They're focusing on what is happening right now in Kashmir, and particularly in the valley with Kashmiri Muslims there. And so that's going to be the focus. And I don't really think there's any way to shift that narrative, so to speak. But I'll just add one more point. We've all discussed how there's been some very critical media coverage, international media coverage about India in terms of what it's doing in Kashmir. I don't think we have to think about the possibility of the world starting to side with Pakistan. That's not going to happen for reasons that we don't need to go into. But I do think for India, perhaps the concern should be implications for its image. I mean, India is viewed with much more favorability and trust on the world stage than most other countries, and particularly Pakistan. But if this critical media coverage continues, if India continues with this lockdown, then I think that you have to start wondering if there could be implications for India's image, for its soft power, which means something. Okay. Given that it's trying to grow out its status as a rising power and wants to continue to be seen as a responsible and important player on the world stage.
I take that point. Seema, would you agree that telephone line restoration that we are reporting right now is all very well, but unless there is active political dissent which is allowed in Kashmir, then international opinion will not be changed?
Yes, I would have to agree with that, because the detention of political leaders has gone down very, very badly out here. India is a democracy, and it's been now a month today. So these are leaders who were with the BJP. They've been part of BJP governments. Why are they under house arrest? It's very difficult to explain. So no matter how big a diplomatic offensive you mount, and our ambassador is working really hard, meeting everybody in town. The problem is very basic, that when these people are released, the government fears that there'll be protests. Of course there'll be protests, but did they not anticipate that? Did they not have a plan for that? And how long can you keep a set of people behind bar? I mean, under house arrest. Sometime you're going to have to let them out.
Sure.
So this is not going down well at all here.
Right. Ambassador Dogra, going forward, there will be protests in Jammu and Kashmir. The scale nobody knows. Do you believe that in terms of messaging, we are prepared in any reasonable way to what will almost inevitably come?
Well, I think there are two important things here. I mean, we must differentiate between what we do internally, whether it takes 6 months or 1 year or 6 weeks, is for the government to judge. Whether they should keep the opposition leaders or some political leaders in detention for a long time is an internal matter of the government of India. But we must explain to the foreign observer what we have in view, what are the compulsions, what Pakistan is doing to ensure that Kashmir remains troubled. But that messaging, as you said very correctly, is not taking place. Let me give you an example of UK. The Britishers knew well in advance that Indian High Commission is going to be attacked. It has been attacked twice in last 15 days. Both the times, the British statement says it was a largely peaceful protest, except for a couple of occasions when some people got out of hand and we were arrested too. this is like saying that the terrorist was largely peaceful except for the bomb which he set off. But the UK's messaging has gone across to the media, whereas we have reacted one day late on the same issue. So my point is, why must we be seen as defensive or inactive on issues like this?
All right. Well, we're completely out of time on this debate. I think that there's some welcome news. It's all confirmed now that there is an effort to restore all phone services, landlines in Jammu and Kashmir as we speak. In Kupwara, cell phones are buzzing once again. It's almost unbelievable to think that for a month there have been no landlines or mobiles. There is still no internet, but hopefully that will be restored sooner than later. Is New Delhi acting on international pressure? Is it acting on common sense? Is it acting on the basis of the rights of millions who've been denied these rights for so long? What's the next step for Jammu and Kashmir? I'd like to thank all of you very much for being with us.